sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition, and we certainly do encourage you to look for many of the articles we're going to post today. I think you're going to find them very helpful. As always, going to look at some of the things that have happened this week, but also looking ahead to next week as well. Penna Dexter, co-host as well as columnist for us at Point of View. Dr. Merrill Matthews, again, a writer for The Hill, speaker and leader. I might just mention we have both of their bios there as well. But Penna Dexter, on Wednesday, I mentioned briefly that there had been a shooting in a school in Minneapolis. And then later in the hour, even though I was doing a book interview, we found out a lot more about the shooter, but it wasn't really appropriate to end the book interview. So I had to wait till Thursday to talk about some of the details. And one of the things I thought would be helpful is this first article by Jim Garrity about mass shootings and simple narratives. Another one coming out on how some of the mainstream press omitted crucial details about the shooting. And I think, if nothing else, it's a reminder that we need to look at various sources for news and information and recognize we need to have some discernment.
We do. I remember thinking when I heard the news, it's just heartbreaking to think of somebody shooting kids in through a window of a church while they're praying, having their chapel service or whatever we want to call that. It's a mass. That was heartbreaking enough. And I remember having this fleeting thought going through my head. I wonder if this was a trans shooter because of what happened at the school in Nashville. And, a lot of times there's this motivation of, Christians don't believe that, I should be a trans person. They don't believe in this. They're against that. So I'm going to go shoot some. And this is exactly what happened. And so, it was a while before we heard that in the news. That's kind of always the case, though. I think they don't want to pick up on that first as the motivation. But when we saw the manifesto, we saw the evil and the just deep-seated hatred that was portrayed in there. That it seems like demonic influences on this shooter. It's heartbreaking, but it also, I think, speaks to the fact that we have, in our culture and society, affirmed transgenderism. We've operated on people, given them hormones. We've put them in a whole category that needs to be coddled and protected, and it's wrong. That's a wrong thing to do, and we need to somehow stop doing it. I don't know how that will happen, but because it didn't help this shooter. It didn't help the one in Nashville. It doesn't help other trans who commit crimes, and there are many. In fact, Heritage Foundation, the Daily Signal, listed some crimes. I couldn't believe how many there were on this list in an article yesterday. So it doesn't. I think what we're doing is not helping them, even though some medical personnel say it is. It's not.
One of the things we've talked about here is in the trans community, there's mental health issues there. There's just a lot of them there. And that had largely been ignored by the media and the medical community until Donald Trump becomes president and sort of ended the woke era. And now the discussions about that have come out. And for people who are in gender dysphoria, there's some mental health issues. And now doctors are able to begin to talk about it and point to some of these issues. And this person is going to have mental health issues. And so that brought up the issue is, okay, is this guns calling this, or is this a mental health crisis that we have out there that we haven't actually addressed very well? And I think we're going to see a little bit, at least from the more conservative media, looking at the issue of the mental health challenges that we have in the country right now.
I'm wondering about the biological aspect. I never even thought about this. Was talking to someone the other day that oftentimes counsels with people that are homosexuals, talking about their lifestyle, and said, I'm concerned about when you put that much estrogen in a male body or that much testosterone in a female body. We're not just talking about the fact that they may have had some mental issues in the first place, because gender dysphoria used to be part of a psychiatric treatment that has been eliminated. But I began to say it's not just the mental health issues. There just could be some physiological issues that maybe need some study.
Perhaps. That's very true, because estrogen was not meant for males, at least not more than minuscule amounts, and same with the testosterone for females. But and you know, it's also a rejection, I think, of God, because I was made female, you were made male. We've accepted that. We've lived our life the way God made us. And so for these people, they're upset because they're forced to accept how God made them. They were both, the two that I mentioned, were both educated in Christian schools where that was taught to them. That was the theology. And yet they feel very rejected because they're rejecting that piece of theology. They're rejecting God, really. They're rejecting how he made them. They're rejecting him. And then there's also the online influences. If you have any inkling that you might be born in the wrong body, it's affirmed in spades online. You're applauded if you make the changes. If you take the hormones, if you have the surgery, whatever, you get so much affirmation for doing that. And if you walk away, like Chloe Cole or others did, then the daggers come out online.
If you're a detransitioner, boy, you really find out that as well.
Yeah, and to your point, when we were teenagers as males, Kerby, those hormones are raging in us.
Yes, sir.
And it confuses us. It's hard. I mean, it's difficult at that time. If you're introducing hormones that are a complete largely alien to us, I just can't imagine what it does to a person in sort of raising all kinds of questions and issues that we might not have struggled with as just going through the normal puberty process.
One of the things that somebody pointed out is USA Today refused to report that she was transgender, but somehow found a way to shoehorn a claim that ICE is causing attacks on churches in the article. And you're starting to hear all these statements about the fact that, well, this is all part of a white supremacy and these white supremacists. And so they try to link it to, of course, the very tragic shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, or a variety of others. And I think there's a sense in which we don't want to stigmatize people that are transgender, but I also think we don't do a favor to the viewing audience or the reading audience when we never even mention some of those very important factors.
We don't. It's really becoming something that people are calling trans terrorism. And as it gets out there, I can understand why they don't want to cause undue fear of transgender people, but we do have to have a healthy fear of that, especially where our children are concerned. And so I do think it needs to be out there. And, people need to be, sometimes if they're bad enough, they need to be institutionalized and they need to be treated when they have mental illness. And when that's not happening, you're not doing the society any favors and you're not doing them any favors.
Yes. Well, we're going to take a break. And again, of course, a lot of this was a discussion about gun control. And yet, again, as I've pointed out, in a state that probably has more significant gun control laws and also a red flag law, that didn't work there. So when people say we need more laws, I'm going, what are we talking about, given the fact that some of these shootings have taken place in states which already have pretty restricted gun laws? Anyway, I just thought it would be another look at that. When we come back, we'll get into some other issues right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Jeff Dornick argues that we need to rethink AI before it destroys what it means to be human. He begins by reminding us that America was built on the foundational belief that we are created in God's image. We are free agents and should not be managed and should not be made to be obsolete. He then shows how AI and robots will be taking over more and more human functions. He talks about self-driving robo-taxis and Optimus, the AI-powered humanoid robot. Tesla showed Optimus babysitting children, teaching in schools, even serving as a doctor. In another scenario, Optimus is flipping burgers and even working as a waiter and a bartender. He wonders if robots and automation will replace service and human connection. We should also mention the fact that Elon Musk wants to merge our brains with AI through his device known as Neuralink. It could erase memories and create new ones that might be helpful for trauma survivors, but dangerous in the hands of authoritarian governments. He raises some of the concerns I mentioned in previous commentaries. It is one thing to automate tasks and relieve workers of mundane and repetitive tasks. It is quite another to automate thoughts, memories, and decision-making. Obviously, we don't want robots rearing our children, even though we should admit they're being schooled every day by their digital devices. He concludes by suggesting we need a national course correction. We should require that future AI developments operate within clear ethical and constitutional boundaries, and I would be glad to provide you with my free booklet on a biblical point of view on artificial intelligence. We need to start a conversation now about the future of artificial intelligence. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of intelligent design, go to viewpoints.info/intelligent design. Viewpoints.info/intelligent design. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, last week we did talk about Cracker Barrel, and this is an article that Penna suggested we might talk about, in part because it is written by Christopher Rufo. I might even recommend his latest book about America's Cultural Revolution. Just fascinating book, and one that we will probably turn into an Outlook article in the future or something of that nature. But I love how he said this, Penna. At first, I dismissed this story as trivial. I'd never set foot in a Cracker Barrel. I will confess I've spent lots of time with my wife in Cracker Barrels, but when I began to talk with Robbie Starbuck, a conservative activist, I began to realize there was more to the story, and I thought it'd be worth coming back to this issue because he's unpacked some of the issues behind this attempt to rebrand Cracker Barrel.
Well, I'm like Chris Rufo. I had never been to a Cracker Barrel until this summer. And we were in Waco, Texas, and late for something. So it was the only restaurant that was close by to grab something to eat. And so we went in, and I was surprised at how good the meal was. I just always had a bad attitude about it. Yeah. We'd driven across many states, and you could have gone there, but we didn't. And then the store in there with all the things that were kind of retro availability of things that were from my childhood. It was just, I spent a lot of time, and then we were almost really late. But that was it. And then to hear this story, how they wiped out logo, and it's such an iconic place to stop at when you're traveling. It's usually on a major highway or freeway. So that, and then I guess they cleared out a lot of the wonderful sort of things from the store. And so, the reaction was just amazing. And it's very interesting to see that they didn't look at, I guess, what was appealing to people. They were having some problems and wanted to update, but that was not the way to do it. And I loved what President Trump said. He said, well, now that they're going back to it, they ought to, make good use of all this free publicity that they've gotten and go back to who they were and just make it better.
And I have gone to Cracker Barrel. I haven't gone for a while, but as Penny said, I loved going through the store because they had so many things that you thought had not been produced for years and years, different kinds of candies and other things of that nature. So that part was great fun. And sometimes you had a waiting list when you were coming in, so you got to go through the store as you were waiting to get a seat. And that I didn't mind waiting as much if I was able to look through the store. And the food was just very, country home style kind of stuff. Right. Chicken fried steak and breakfast and biscuits and gravy and so forth. And the waitresses were usually waitresses, if I recall right, and they were a lot of times older people, and it was just great fun. So changing it, and this is the problem. As you move forward, you want to be, if you're going to sort of change things and try to update them, you want to carry on with something of the original and just make some gradual changes. And I don't know if they tested this or not, but it just has not worked well for them. And then when you have to go from what you did and you spent the money for all those changes, now you've got to go back. You've just wasted money. And it reminds me of Coke Classic. Remember when Coke decided we're going to go to a new Coke formula, and they got all kinds of pushback for it, and they had to come up and eventually go back and call it Coke Classic. And
Well, as Chris Rufo pointed out in the piece that we posted at pointofview.net, I think what this does is it shows the strength of the conservative sort of marketplace and the power of our activism in with regard to these organizations. They call it a boycott. I don't know if people boycotted Cracker Barrel or not, but he says conservatives can win these culture fights, and it was very quick. The backlash came very quickly online and elsewhere, and obviously we've won. The conservatives have won on this one. Corporations follow the narrative in the media, so they often take the leftist liberal narrative that the mainstream media espouses, and that's not always the best marketing. And then behavior changes through reward and punishment. So the behavior of this corporation changed because of the punishment that conservatives meted out, and it all happened so quickly. I mean, 2 weeks ago, this wasn't even on anybody's radar.
What I thought I'd do is for just a minute talk about some of the decisions that led to that. We can mention, and he talks about Bud Light, Harley Davidson, Tractor Supply, John Deere. You can go through the long list. You know it as well as I do. And I sometimes bring my little bag. It's a Target bag. And then I also have Ben & Jerry's. And I've got an empty can of Bud Light and a few of others. And it brings us back, Dr. Matthews, to what I call the bubble. And that is a number of years ago, I wrote about the study that was done by Charles Murray, of all people.
Right.
And you can still go to PBS and you can take a bubble test. And the bubble test shows you whether or not you're living inside the bubble, which I suspect some of these CEOs are, or whether they live in the real world. And I do remember one of the questions there was, have you ever been to an Applebee's? And it's amazing how many of those individuals that live in the Upper East Side in Manhattan, which is one of the bubbliest zip codes. Another bubble zip code is Silicon Valley in California. And another question was, have you ever ridden in a truck, and around here we're all like, are you kidding me? There are people that say no to that.
Do they sell something else?
First of all, when I lived in Connecticut, I knew people in Connecticut and New York that had never driven a car. Just think that through for a minute. Never driven a car, which means you've never seen a lot of the things that we've talked about here. So in some respects, the broader issue, some of those were woke. Here, this was more about nostalgia. But whatever it is, do we have a problem in corporate America where some of these people live in such a bubble they don't even understand the product they're supposedly selling?
I think that's part of it. And of course, the challenge here is if you've got an iconic brand, and there's lots of iconic brands out there, but you've had it for years, decades maybe, and you feel like it's time to update it. How do you do that in a way that doesn't alienate people? Point of view, you had the same introductory music for decades, and you finally decided to update that, and it has this sort of feel of what was there before. I mean, it seemed like an updated version in some sense of what you had been using, and I thought it was a perfect change for that. And that's the real challenge. If you're a CEO, how do you do this without alienating people? Put a fresh look out there, carry over from some of the theme that you had, unless you're just trying to completely abandon that, and then still be able to attract new people with that fresh look. And it's a hard challenge, and many CEOs just don't do it well.
You even, not that you're a graphics guy, said, couldn't we put the old guy where the C is and the barrel kind of where the B is or something?
Right.
We've seen this before. We were talking off air about the fact, you've ever seen IHOP? It looks like a face. If you look at Amazon, there's an arrow from A to Z. I mean, FedEx has an arrow. If you really look at it more than once, you realize that sometimes you can keep the icon modified a little bit and make it look progressive, but still keep some of the elements in the past.
That's why those people earn the big bucks, the ones that can do that. You know, there was a study that was done. This just has to do with people's taste in their food and where they get it.
Yeah.
And it was by David Wasserman of the Cook Political Report, done back in 2016, of the electorate. And he was comparing people who went to Cracker Barrel versus the people that went to Whole Foods. And it was the traditional conservative, evangelical, Bible-believing, church-going, gun-owning, pro-life Republicans who went. This was done in 2022.
Yeah.
Who overly went to Cracker Barrel over Whole Foods. Now, I'm like one of those Whole Foods people that's really conservative.
Yeah.
But I understand this study and its outcome. And I think that was where, that kind of a study would have been helpful, I think, to these planners at Cracker Barrel.
Yes. And there are some of us, you and I probably like that, where we could be in a Starbucks, which is oftentimes seen as left of center. Cracker Barrel is seen as right of center. A Whole Foods is seen as left of center. I mean, you kind of recognize that some people move back and forth. But the problem back is, again, sometimes conservatives are in their silos, and I recognize that. But liberals really are in their silos. And earlier in the week, I talked about Jonathan Haidt in his book, documented then when they did a study trying to have conservatives talk about how liberals view the world. They did pretty well. When they asked liberals to talk about how conservatives view the world, they were clueless. And so in some respects, we all live in our silos, but if there's a lesson here, maybe you are in a bubble and you need to get out of it, especially if you're a CEO of this company.
Exactly, yeah. And they probably paid big bucks to have that new brand come in.
Yeah.
And
I saw how much they spent. It was a lot. Yeah.
And now it's wasted. They got to pay money to go back.
It's just amazing. Anyway, just a lesson to be learned. And again, some of the reasons we do this are whether you go to Cracker Barrel or not, maybe it's just a reminder, get out of your bubble a little bit, read widely, and evaluate some of the things that are happening. And we will take a break, get into some of the articles by Dr. Merrill Matthews right after this.
Let me ask you something, if I may. Have you been blessed by Point of View? We often hear from listeners about the positive impact that Point of View has in their lives. As one listener told us, Point of View leaves me informed and encouraged. So this may surprise you. Out of all the Point of View's hundreds of thousands of listeners, just 1% supports the program. And yet Point of View relies on listener donations. If every listener gave just $10, Point of View's full ministry and operations would be funded for an entire year. Let me ask you again, have you been blessed by Point of View? I urge you, pay it forward today with a $10 donation so others may be blessed as well. Give online at pointofview.net. Or you can call us and give toll-free 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Penna Dexter, Merrill Matthews in studio with us today. We're going to talk about the Federal Reserve. I'm asking that you not let your eyes glaze over, because when we talk about the interest rates, that's going to affect the interest rates you might be paying. For those of you that are thinking about buying a house, if interest rates go down, and certainly the house prices may be going down, as we pointed out just the other day, 500,000 more sellers of houses than buyers. So maybe the price of houses may be going down. This is important. So we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve. And of course, just recently, we did give you a little bit of a teaching on the Federal Reserve. I might just, for those of you that are supporters of Point of View or considering supporting Point of View, an upcoming issue on Outlook goes into the Federal Reserve, its history, what all that means. But Dr. Merrill Matthews has written a piece, Penna, on Fed packing is no better than court packing. We can remember when Kelly Shackelford's been here, we've talked about court packing and the desire of course, Joe Biden to try to add more to the court. More recently, even the Raging Cajun is saying maybe we need 13 on the court. So Democrats have been really excited about that. But Merrill Matthews, when Donald Trump wants to remove one of the board of governors from the Federal Reserve, including the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that sort of looks like Fed packing. So explain.
It does. And remember, when we were talking about the court packing, it wasn't just increasing the numbers. The media were going around looking for things in Justice Clarence Thomas's background, Samuel Alito's, trying to find something that they say here is a real conflict of interest, so that Democrats would then come out and say, well, these people have to be removed. They need to resign. If not, we need to impose an ethics form on them so that they have to follow new ethics and so forth. So that was going on. That was a stringent practice going on through all of last year and even a little before. And so what's happened now is that's kind of put on the back burner. Democrats don't want President Trump appointing more people to this court, but Trump has put this into the Fed packing. He's been going after, as you mentioned, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed. He has been trying to get him resigned. Then, because it looks like the Supreme Court will not support just firing him, it has to be for cause. Then they came up and said, well, Chairman Powell has not managed this new Fed renovation project, about $2.5 billion. So he went and met with him on that. That's apparently on the back burner right now, though it's still active. But what's happened is that the head of the Federal Housing Agency, Bill Pulte, came up and said, well, we have found that Lisa Cook, one of the Fed governors, a Biden appointee, an economist by training, has engaged in mortgage fraud. Apparently, she has two mortgages out there and claimed a primary home on both of them, and they weren't that far apart. So, a couple of things. Let me just walk you through some of this. She has not denied the charges. Today, I saw that she said it may have been a clerical error, but we don't have any information yet about what a clerical error might be on that. Can she be removed for charge? She has taken it and filed suit. That was a hearing supposed to be at 10 o'clock Eastern today. I haven't heard what the results of that is going to be. But she's trying to stop the president from doing this because she says he doesn't have the authority to fire her. We think he has the authority to fire a Fed governor for cause, but what does for cause mean? Does that mean that they were doing something wrong while they were on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank? In other words, falsifying travel expenses, abusing some employee there, something of that nature. Is that what for cause means? Does it mean I could be engaged in something outside of the Federal Reserve Bank and that's wrong, and then is that for cause, or does it mean they can go after me even before the Senate approved her, which was, I think, a year or two ago?
Right.
So we're not entirely sure what for cause means. In addition, could it be that could this be an innocent mistake? And I'll just give you an example. Let's say I'm working here in Dallas. I got a job. I bought a house. I go and I get I take out a loan on it. This is my primary residence. My boss comes up and says, we've got a problem with the Kansas City office. I'm going to send you up there for a couple of months to try to take care of that. Okay, so I go for a couple of months. After that, the boss comes back and says, you're going to need to be there at least a year. So get your family and move on up there. Okay, well, I've got a house here. I claim primary residence. Now my family's coming up here, but I think I'm coming back. So maybe I put this up for rent, and we go and we buy a house up there, and they say, "Is this your primary residence?" Yeah, it's my primary residence. Of course, I'm living here.
You never went back and changed the other documents.
I never went back
who would
and changed
do that?
It. Now, am I guilty of mortgage fraud?
Yeah.
So there's that possibility. We just don't know right now. So there may be an innocent explanation. This is going to have to come out some point, and we just don't know. So, what is clear though is because this was from her past. Apparently, the administration has sent out a word to various agencies. We want you looking through the past of some of these people to see if you can find something that went wrong so that we can change. My understanding, he's charging Letitia James with mortgage fraud.
Yes.
My understanding, I may be wrong, but my understanding is that's from something back in 2003 or 4. So this just didn't emerge and become apparent. They're looking for people to be able to fire, and that creates, I think, a real problem because you now you've got a president who's looking for reasons to fire these people, to test his ability to be able to fire them. He says he'll stand by the court. This will likely go to the Supreme Court, hopefully fairly quickly, and we'll see what would happen. But in the meantime, the Federal Reserve Bank is in something of a quandary. Do we go along with Lisa Cook, or is she when we meet in 3 weeks? Is she allowed to vote or not? Is it somebody else? We just don't know.
And again, I might just mention that today they did have a hearing, went for 2 hours, and the judge wants to hear some more in the future. So we'll see. Let's kick the can down the road a little further, but we have no decision in that.
Well, it just kind of reminds me of some of the things that in President Trump's record that was scrutinized, and that he was
accused of a lot of crimes.
Accused of, spent a lot of money defending himself. And so I just have to come back and say that this President Trump, I mean, he's a unique kind of person. And he really knows what he wants and he wants to accomplish. And he will try lots of different ways to do it, which you can obviously see he's doing that right now. Some of them are questionable, not legally, but they're just, you'll never be able to do that. But I'm going to try. That's just kind of his attitude sometimes. That's who he is.
That was Joe Biden too, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think the Supreme will strike me down, but I'm going to try it anyway. And he did an executive order about the idea of not having mail-in ballots, and he's had some executive orders on not burning an American flag. And so I think he knows that most of those are losers, but he's going to give it a try anyway.
But when he comes back into the government, and there's so many people that are populating the government who have fought against him in his first term, or who cannot be reliably supportive of his agenda, that he's going to be on the front heels in trying to prevent that even before that he sees it. I think that's Trump again. He's a unique character, doesn't excuse things, but it does explain something. And
I guess a week ago that the FBI raided John Bolton's house and office.
I was going to bring that one up too.
And John Bolton has become critical, even though he worked in the administration. He's been very critical of this. But this isn't trying to set a new agenda, because John Bolton isn't part of anything. So it's not like Lisa Cook at the Federal Reserve Bank. And then I saw Kash Patel send out a note saying no one is above the law. Yeah. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Was New York Mayor Eric Adams above the law when he was under federal indictment by the federal attorneys in New York, and you decided to push that off because you said we need to be able to work with him on immigration? It sounded like Eric Adams got a pass on his what was alleged as criminal actions.
And so then we wonder why sometimes the Gen Y, Gen Z are saying, I've just had it with politics, because we do see some of that is played one way against the other. I just think, again, trying to remove an individual, Lisa Cook in particular, because of something that could be a clerical error, or maybe was even, as some people have mentioned in the past, sometimes when you're you're sort of an elitist, you think, well, I can just do this because nobody's going to catch me. And that could be the case.
Could be.
She might even be saying, wait a minute, I know all sorts of people that have done this. Why am I getting singled out?
Maybe she never read the fine prints on her loan documents.
The Fed generally goes by consensus, so it's generally unanimous votes. It was not that way in July, but at least, I'm not defending. I know nothing about Lisa Cook, but she, I think, was generally a sort of a silent voice. I mean, she just went along with the votes, and so it's not like she was a rabble rouser causing problems.
No, as a matter of fact, President Biden said he wanted to put an African American on the court, and he did. He put an African American on the Supreme Court, put an African American on who actually has no experience at all with monetary policy or the Fed, but nevertheless,
she
that
was
is
an
the
economist,
case.
but that's...
She was an economist. That's about it. You didn't even bring up the fact you used to work at the Federal Reserve.
I did used to work at the Federal Reserve a long time ago.
That does go back a while as well. But let's take a break. We'll get into a couple other issues. But if you wanted to hear about this issue of Fed packing, it is one of our articles on the website. We'll be right back.
The year was 1977. I was a baby Christian living in a suburb of Los Angeles. I volunteered to man the book table at an event at our church put on by a new organization, Focus on the Family. Before the program even started, attendees were stopping at my table, buying books with titles like Dare to Discipline, Hide or Seek, Preparing for Adolescence, What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. A kind man approached to thank me for helping. I didn't realize yet that he was the speaker. He told me to choose a couple of books for myself. I wasn't a parent then or even married, but that was the day Dr. James Dobson began to have an influence on my parenting. I listened to enough Focus on the Family radio that I felt I really knew Dr. Dobson when I finally got to interview him on Point of View. Over the years, he was gracious to appear on the show, mostly covering hot-button issues. Dr. Dobson's calling to equip parents informed his growing concern about societal challenges to the traditional family, including divorce, abortion, and the redefinition of marriage. He took some bold stances and encouraged millions of American parents to join him. In early 2010, out of the blue, I received an interesting request. Tyndale House Publishers wanted to know if I would interview Dr. Dobson for a promotional special on his latest book, Bringing Up Girls. I agreed, and in March, I flew to Colorado Springs. I encountered a weary Dr. Dobson. The U.S. Congress was on the verge of passing Obamacare. Dr. Dobson was in the thick of the battle to ensure abortion would not be funded through the legislation. He was gracious. We discussed the book, our daughters, we each had one, hormones, and how to raise girls in a hostile culture. Dr. Dobson has finished his course faithfully. He enters the rest and joy prepared for him. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let's move on to another topic. And, of course, one of the other articles by Dr. Merrill Matthews has to do with what we call universal basic income and how the tech titans think they can save Social Security. But to understand that, let me hold up the booklet that we have, A Biblical Point of View on Artificial Intelligence. Turns out that we're going to talk about Penna Dexter's commentary, which many of you may have heard just a minute ago. My commentary today is on AI and humanity, and the one one last week was on AI and jobs, and that relates very much to this issue because, Dr. Matthews, the concern has been that artificial intelligence is going to take jobs. I think right now it's more augmenting jobs, but eventually it's going to be going from augmentation to automation. You will lose your job. White-collar, especially entry-level white-collar jobs will be taken over by these smart computers.
And there are people now who are saying they're having trouble finding a job because...
So how are we going to pay for that?
Reason.
Which brings us back to one of the other commentaries I've done multiples on, and as a matter of fact, we had Chuck Bentley on because he's written a book that has a whole chapter on universal basic income, and that's something that was proposed during the Democratic primary, something that people at Silicon Valley have suggested. So help us out here because this is the idea that, well, since we're generating wealth through these machines, we've got to figure out a way to distribute that because a lot of people won't have a job.
Right, and that's several of our billionaire tech titans have been somewhat infatuated with the notion of a universal basic income, and a couple of them have even done experiments, pilot projects, where they would provide money somewhere between $500 or $1,000 a month to several thousand people over, say, 3 years to see how that worked. And there was no strings attached. You just got the money. And they were targeting lower income people, but universal basic income basically means everybody gets a check. So Bill Gates would get the check just like everybody else. So what they're saying is there's an argument that artificial intelligence is going to save so much money that we should take that money that we're saving from that. They're not explaining how that money gets to us, but and then use that money to create a universal basic income for everybody. And I raise a couple of questions. Usually income is created by a company or an individual. So if I'm a company and I create that, then if the government's going to hand that out to everybody, they've got to come take it away from me. They're trying to say this isn't really a taxation thing, but I'm not sure how it's anything but. If the federal government has got big stakes in some of these companies and it's getting this money, as Trump has said, NVIDIA is going to be providing 15%. Intel is going to be paying 10%. If the federal government's getting a big stake in these companies and money is coming into the federal government, then you could use it that way, I suppose. But my other point is universal basic income is not a good idea because where they've tried it, they found out that if it does anything, it discourages people from working. Cut back on hours a few hours. They take the money and use it for other things. They may buy things that they need, food and groceries and so forth. But it discourages work, and you're creating a new entitlement. So I suggest that if you decide to go this direction, I don't think we're going to have that money available to hand out. But if you do go this direction, you do have the money, that you should create, in essence, a retirement account for people and use the money to fund their retirement account that they don't get until age 65 or 65, something like that. That way you're not discouraging work now. What you're also doing is maybe setting up a new form of retirement plan, which could become a private Social Security account at some point in the future. A lot of us have wished we didn't have traditional Social Security, that we have just taken all that money we paid into the federal government, went into a private account, used it in some kind of basic, S&P 500 fund, NASDAQ fund, something like that, where we're not day trading with it, and then we have that money for our retirement. You would have so much more than what you get now. But anyway, my suggestion is if we do go that direction, instead of a universal basic income, use it as a retirement fund for people when they retire. Then they would have additional money to retire on.
I typed in universal basic income on our website, and up pops a Penna Dexter commentary, Merrill Matthews' previous commentary, and even one of my commentaries. Matter of fact, I've done 2 recently. And part of that has to do, Penna, with the fact that when they've tried that, the National Bureau of Economic Research found it didn't work very well. And then they tried it in Finland. Didn't work very well. And what a surprise. If you give people money and they don't work, guess what? They don't work anymore. And if you pay people not to work, they don't work. It's just pretty basic.
We have a big problem right now with the lack of work incentives. And there's a piece recently by Jason Riley in the Wall Street Journal.
Yes.
All the government programs that we have right now, transfer payments, make it not working more attractive than getting a job. And he says, Nicholas Eberstadt of the American Enterprise Institute has studied this. Nearly 7 million men in the prime of life, over a tenth of the 25 to 54 age group are either working or looking for a job, and that's the prime. And, we have another problem with families where the mom is the breadwinner and the dad isn't. I mean, that's fine if you want to do it, but a lot of times it's forced on people. So, and the men, some of them are just staying home and they're not even looking. So do we want to exacerbate that with this? I mean, when Elon Musk said it, and other people have said, well, we'll just pay people. We'll pay Americans for AI. I love your idea, buddy. When you look at this idea of using it for retirement instead, it's not another entitlement because you still would have Social Security.
Right.
But I think one of your ideas here is that whichever had more money in it is what you would take, and then you would help Social Security because they would not have as many people to cover.
Right. That's the point, is that you could still keep Social Security because liberals are opposed to doing anything to Social Security. So keep Social Security. I would still continue paying my payroll tax, but if this money is going into a private account for me, then when I get to a retirement age, 60 or 65 or 70, whatever it is, I could choose whichever one I want. And if I choose the private money or the money that was set aside, then I'm not drawing on Social Security. So that leaves more money for Social Security to pay for the people who stay there. Because Social Security has got $100 trillion unfunded assets, something like that.
That's right.
Yeah. It's a huge amount of money that we're going to have to pay that we're not expected to get. So you could make the choice in that, and you could get people. I think you'd find most people would choose the private account, and you might be able to dramatically shrink Social Security population and eventually shift it over.
Some of the criticism right now is it's hard to buy a house, and I just shared a minute ago that you have many more sellers than you have buyers, which tells me that maybe the house prices are going to go down. In Miami, it's 3-to-1, 3 times as many sellers as there are buyers. So that could affect the next generation, Generation Y and Generation Z. How about this one, that you might have an AI-funded retirement account? Because you ask the average millennial, do you think Social Security will be there? They think, I have a better chance of seeing an alien than I do.
Frank Luntz asked that question back in the 90s, and it was one of the great questions.
So there is the case. And so they're talking about an AI-funded retirement account, maybe. We're talking about a Bitcoin strategic reserve. We're talking about just all sorts of things that are completely outside of the box. And hopefully some of those might work, because I think this generation is saying, what is for us? And all of us have children and now grandchildren that we do wonder about in the future. So this may be another creative way to start thinking through this issue.
Well, we need to think through it because we've got a huge unfunded liability in Social Security and Medicare, and they don't have a good solution right now. And any attempt to try to change it gets a huge pushback from both the right and the left.
Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into a couple of other issues. If you thought that Donald Trump is through with his creative ideas, no, he would like to redo the census, so we'll get into that issue. Dr. Merrill Matthews has written about that. We have the Texas Bluebonnet Bible curricula, which actually turned out pretty well. We talked about that with Keisha Russell a while back. And Victor Davis Hanson said, okay, when I look at the Democratic Party that seems leaderless and coming up with so many crazy ideas, what made the Democratic Party go crazy? Well, we'll talk about that right after this.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today in studio with us, of course, Penna Dexter and Dr. Merrill Matthews. And Dr. Matthews, again, just never know what the president is going to do. It is funny because Democrats sometimes say, well, he's doing things that are unprecedented. And I'm thinking, yeah, but they could mention what we're going to talk about, the census. We could talk about the Federal Reserve. Even today, he used a pocket rescission. Haven't used that in 50 years. They don't mention any of that. Instead, they say, well, he's abusing his power by deploying the federal troops to Washington, D.C., which seems pretty obvious. But nevertheless, has there ever been a time when the president of the United States or any governmental official has suggested that instead of doing a census every 10 years, we do one in the middle of those 10 years?
There have been a few times that they've tried to do a recount, but he's talking about doing a 2025 census, which is, of course, we do it every 10
which
years.
Which is unprecedented.
Yes, okay. Yeah, it's unprecedented to do this, but and part of the rationale makes a certain amount of sense. The 2020 census was not a good census because of COVID.
Yeah.
It was a mess. They had trouble getting people to go out and check on people. They had to do more estimates because when they do this, they have people go out and count, but they also do estimates for people they can't reach and try to make other adjustments to the thing. And it was not. I mean, almost everybody agrees it was not a very good census. And so now he feels like there was undercounts. And as I point out in the piece, there were the undercounts were in largely red states, and the overcounts were in largely blue states.
Yes.
And so if you're overcounting Massachusetts, New York, or something of that nature, then they could get more representation in Congress than the states that they undercount. If you did an accurate account, some of the red states might get another member of Congress or two. We don't know. I mean, that's just speculation, but it's possible. But it was interesting when I looked at this that the overcounts were in mostly blue states, undercounts in mostly red states. That's a little too. It's a little odd, wouldn't you think? I mean, maybe a little too coincidental.
They were saying that Rhode Island should have lost a representative, and I know we broadcast in Rhode Island, and that Texas lost a possible additional one. So you can see that it isn't just a little bit undercount, a little bit overcount. It would make a difference in the Electoral College, Penna, and in certainly the representation in the House of Representatives.
Well, just I think it was just today the governor of Texas signed a redistricting bill, and this came from on high. I mean, it did come from Trump wanting to see some of these changes.
More Republicans.
Yeah, more Republicans. And he, again, I mean, I just have to say, he wants to make some of his legacy permanent. He wants to bring certain practices back into the government that haven't been there for a long time. And so the fairness in the census, I think, is part of that whole agenda. He doesn't want to just leave office someday and have it all go back to the way it was. So he does these things. And, you know, whether it's legal or not, we'll find out. And whether it's effective or not, and he gets what he wants or not, we'll find out. Yeah,
unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
Yes. Many things that he does are.
There's challenges in doing a new census. I mean, typically they take several years to prepare for this as they try to hire the people who are going to go out and do it.
Sure.
They go through the right questions. They have to get the questions vetted because in some cases you might have add a new question or you feel like you need to change one. So this is a process, And it's not going to be done in 2025.
But knowing Trump, he'll try to shortcut a lot of things.
He may very well. So
do it more efficiently.
And so it's a challenge to do this. There's a justification for doing it because of the problem with 2020 census, and one other thing he wants to do is he wants to count illegals, which they do not do in the census right now. So I say they don't count them. They count them, but they don't identify them as being here as unauthorized, undocumented immigrants. And the point I want to make is that skews certain things. So if you say there's 30 million uninsured, a good percentage of those, I would think maybe a third of them are going to be here who are undocumented and are not eligible for Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
At least not legally eligible, because they could have falsified IDs and it might end up getting that. So it skews the numbers in a way we say, well, there's 30 million uninsured. We've got to do something about that. But what if you find out there's really only 20 million who could actually benefit from the programs that are available and not 30 million? Does that change the dynamic in what we try to do for that? So there's a justification for trying to identify the people who are here undocumented and then let Congress figure out in what ways they may or may not want to include them.
One of the things I appreciate is later on in the article, you remind us of, first of all, the fact that he did want to, when he was in his first term, try to add a citizenship question to the census, and the Supreme Court blocked that. Mm-hmm. There is a bigger issue, and that is the 14th Amendment says that you count whole persons.
Right.
And so a person is anybody, male, female, young or old, legal or illegal. But the bottom line is going to be argued that if they're here illegally and may even be deported, we wouldn't count them any more than we would count somebody who is, say, here for visitation, vacation, maybe that they're an ambassador, all sorts of people that we would not count. So there are all sorts of legal and constitutional issues there too, aren't there?
Yes, and so the president faces the hurdles, and including the fact that the Supreme Court has weighed in on this. But I still, in my opinion, I would allow them to count them. If you want to protect their identity, then you could say, okay, you're here. We understand you're illegal. We won't identify you as your name is illegal. We're just running a tabulation of how many people who are undocumented, so that we have a sense of how many that is. You could do it some way like that, but I think it's important to know, in the counting of this, to know who is here legally and not legally.
Yeah.
It is important to know that. The accuracy sounds very difficult to attain, though, in a sense, because there'd be a lot of fear out there of being identified and being seen as illegal. And even though they're telling me they're not going to go after me or identify me, they will. So that would be one thing. But the other part of it is, what does it do? I mean, does it cause us then to implement more programs in the name of compassion for people who are here illegally that, maybe other people are going to disagree with spending that money? So there's going to be, it throws a lot of monkey wrenches into it, one way or the other, I think.
But this is one of those debates I think we should have.
I think we should have it. And, of course, the other day we got talking about the fact that there was some research being done that suggests that the number of people that are illegal in this country have dropped by a full 1 million people.
I've seen that.
And the argument was, interestingly enough, that it wasn't that these people have been deported. It was that a lot of people had self-deported. And so about 750,000 self-deported, and in round numbers about 300,000 just passed on. After all, if you've been here for more than 60 or 70 years, you may have already died anyway. So the bottom line is that as they were doing the calculation, saying we may have fewer people here illegally than we thought we did. Still, it's in the millions, but we are starting to get a handle on it simply because of deporting. But remember when everybody made fun of the idea that people would self-deport? Looks like 750,000 did self-deport.
They were paying them $1,000 for a while anyway.
Yeah, certainly were. Anyway, that's the census. I think we'll be talking about this for many weeks, but it's a piece by Dr. Merrill Matthews. We'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Jeff Dornick argues that we need to rethink AI before it destroys what it means to be human. He begins by reminding us that America is built on the foundational belief that we are created in God's image. We are free agents and should not be managed and should not be made to be obsolete. He then shows how AI and robots will be taking over more and more human functions. He talks about self-driving robotaxis and Optimus, the AI-powered humanoid robot. Tesla showed Optimus babysitting children, teaching in schools, even serving as a doctor. In another scenario, Optimus is flipping burgers and even working as a waiter and a bartender. He wonders if robots and automation will replace service and human connection. We should also mention the fact that Elon Musk wants to merge our brains with AI through his device known as Neuralink. It could erase memories and create new ones that might be helpful for trauma survivors, but dangerous in the hands of authoritarian governments. He raises some of the concerns I mentioned in previous commentaries. It is one thing to automate tasks and relieve workers of mundane and repetitive tasks. It is quite another to automate thoughts, memories, and decision-making. Obviously, we don't want robots rearing our children, even though we should admit they're being schooled every day by their digital devices. He concludes by suggesting we need a national course correction. We should require that future AI developments operate within clear ethical and constitutional boundaries, and I would be glad to provide you with my free booklet on a biblical point of view on artificial intelligence. We need to start a conversation now about the future of artificial intelligence. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of intelligent design, go to viewpoints.info/intelligent design. Viewpoints.info/intelligent design. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes on the topic of what is going on in the state of Texas, and then we'll move on to some other topics. But I thought it would be helpful for those of you, even though we broadcast in over 40 states, that what is happening in Texas might be something you would want to begin to implement in your own state. And it has to do with this piece that you recommended, Dr. Merrill Matthews, which was look at the Texas school districts that have been willing to sign up for this new, it's called a Bible-infused curricula. Now, we've talked about this a little bit with Keisha Russell. She testified in that regard. It just barely passed 8-7 before the State Board of Education. But interestingly enough, this goes on for pages to talk about the fact, Penna, that about a quarter of these Texas school districts have signed up for what is a curricula that I think more honestly talks about our history. And this year, of course, we're going to be producing, matter of fact, the most recent booklet we sent out is One Nation Under God, but we're in the 250th anniversary of this country. And it is sad to say that most young people and a lot of old people have never learned anything about the godly history of America. This curriculum is not that overt, I don't think, unless you listen to the ACLU, but it recognizes that some of these individuals were certainly using their faith, exercising their faith, and there was certainly a very definite biblical emphasis in the founding and framing of this country.
Yes, it looks like per student, they get $60 per student for using it, and that it's free. You don't have to pay for it. It's the Blue Bonnet curriculum is what it's called. And, you know, one thing that it does is it's kind of more truthful and American and conservative. And then you add the religious component, which, as we've all said, none of us have seen this, so we don't know how religious it is. But there was something passed in Texas that allowed the teaching of the Bible in the public schools. And everybody needs to know something about the Bible just to be an educated person. So, this has not been that controversial, and 1 in 4 school districts signing up for this curriculum. I mean, I think it's not really anything but good. It's a good thing.
And one of the things teachers are in something of a hard spot here, because clearly the Western tradition, biblical ethics and so forth influence what we did, how we think, whether or not, are we monogamous or polygamous, where we have it infused everything that we thought. Doesn't mean that you're a Bible thumper, as we sometimes say, or something of that nature, but it has a strong historical context to it, and teachers might have been somewhat reluctant to point that out. If you look at the number of people who were signing the Constitution, the large majority of them were professing evangelicals. I mean, they were church members professing evangelicals. Some may have been more professing than they were actually living, but it played a role in there in how they thought about things. Yeah. So if you were a teacher and you tried to identify these things, and you brought in the Ten Commandments, you brought in history and other things, you might have been called on the carpet for doing that, getting too close to religion. But religion, especially Jewish history, plays a big role in our thinking.
In our founding days, there was more of a Christian consensus just among the population, and today it's not so much. But I think what happened in Texas, in one sense, is that we are more conservative and more religious, and so they felt a little more comfortable in presenting this curriculum, this bluebonnet curriculum, because Texas is just that kind of a state. Now, if you went to New York, you would not get anything like this bluebonnet. It wouldn't pass muster in a liberal state. But since you're in a place like Texas, it is. And so that's why I applaud it. I do think that, there's a lot to be done. If we are wanting to influence our culture as believers, then we need some unique curricula out there. And we need to stay involved politically so that we can influence our culture.
One of the things I'll hold up here is this booklet that we've mailed out. You'll be seeing it very soon, and it's entitled A Biblical View on One Nation Under God. And it's really based upon a book that was put together by David Gibbs and Jerry Newcomb, in which they talk about things every Christian should know. And one of the things that they recommend, the second one, is the Pilgrims clearly stated they came to the New World to glorify God and to advance the Christian faith. Well, that's just historically accurate, and yet I remember Gary Bauer, when he was at that time the Undersecretary of Education under Bill Bennett. Remember back in those days, he testified the fact that they had textbooks that talk about the fact that in the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims gave thanks and never told who they gave thanks to or why they gave thanks. As a matter of fact, the implication was they gave thanks to the Indians instead of giving thanks to God. So we have had such a desire to scrub any kind of religious understanding from our textbooks that just a little bit of that would be helpful. Another one here is, again, this idea, and this is, I think, in the curriculum, because we were talking about this the other day with Keisha Russell, how many of these universities were founded on a Christian perspective. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, William and Mary. You just start thinking through that. That would be totally new information to the average student, and to recognize, even if they no longer believe in biblical truth, that's how these universities were founded. And you've got to go almost 150 years before you get the founding of, I think it was Johns Hopkins, which was the first really secular established university, because most of them were established through some denomination or some church.
Well, remember, some of them came over thinking that they were establishing the New Jerusalem. And so you have cities like New Bethlehem and other cities that named that. And there were some, they were operating, many of them were sort of from the Puritan legacy, believing in postmillennialism. That's a term we don't talk about much anymore, but the postmillennial view was that Christ was going to take over and the Christian reign would be established on the earth before Christ comes back. They would you'd basically have a Christianized earth before Christ would return. And so the post-millennium was the millennium starts after we all become Christian, and they thought they were sort of establishing that. it's an important part of our history. They may have been wrong in that, but it's an important part of the history.
Well, and the other part of that as well, we just talked about those that signed the Declaration, and then you have those that signed the Constitution. And even more recently, you've had some people that say, well, if James Madison was the architect of the Constitution, where did he learn those ideas? And that is from the Professor Witherspoon, who was at Princeton, at that time was College of New Jersey, studied Calvinism. I mean, I just don't think you can understand the idea of checks and balances, many of the ideas, even the idea of one nation under God, without having some discussion of that. And so certainly, as we would imagine, Penna, there are some Americans United for the Separation of Church and State and the ACLU and others that are against this. But I don't think this infuses anything more than just trying to not scrub all the biblical references out of our secular history and recognize that there was certainly a very definite element of a Christian perspective in our history as well.
Yes, I don't know in Texas how many years it was that it was scrubbed out of the curriculum in this state. I remember growing up in California, I don't remember anything biblical in our history lessons, any books that had any Christian. I mean, we were already on the cutting edge of the leftist type of curriculum, even back 100 years ago when I was in elementary school. Do you remember? You were in California too. Do you remember
Except
any?
We talked to the missions and the
we studied the missions.
That was about it. That was the closest you came to anything like that. And a good illustration of that is from time to time I'm invited to speak on One Nation Under God to a 80 and more kind of group. So these are individuals that are as old as those of us around the table, even older. And it's amazing how many of them have said, I did not know half of this, and they want to get all the material. Matter of fact, that's why we have printed thousands of extras of these, because I got a feeling we got one right now on One Nation of God, one on Bill of Rights, a couple of others, Federalist Papers, all those kinds of things, because during this 250th anniversary, I think it's a great time to educate everybody. And all of us around the table, we didn't have this last week because we had a younger person, I think all of us around the table remember the bicentennial in 1976. And we were saying, well, it may not be the same under 250 years, but then, of course, we have Donald Trump in the White House. So I don't know if we're going to have a UFC fight on the South Lawn or a few other things, but we're going to have quite a bit of things that might cause us to go back and recognize that there was certainly godly influence in the founding of this country.
Let's hope so.
When I did my dissertation, one of the things I found out was there was a debate in the early 1800s as whether or not the Constitution was based upon a Baptist, Congregational, or Presbyterian form of ecclesiastical government. They were debating that. They were different people taking different positions as to whether it was based upon one of those.
I give you a little bit on Presbyterian there because we talk about the Mecklenburg Declaration on that. So again, but the fact is we were having those kind of debates, and now we're not even having the debate. And so I think this is good. Anyway, if you'd like to know about this particular curriculum, it may not be implemented in your state, but I'm thinking maybe we need to educate our children and grandchildren around the table. We'll be right back.
Let me ask you something, if I may. Have you been blessed by Point of View? We often hear from listeners about the positive impact that Point of View has in their lives. As one listener told us, Point of View leaves me informed and encouraged. So this may surprise you. Out of all the Point of View's hundreds of thousands of listeners, just 1% supports the program. And yet Point of View relies on listener donations. If every listener gave just $10, Point of View's full ministry and operations would be funded for an entire year. Let me ask you again, have you been blessed by Point of View? I urge you, pay it forward today with a $10 donation so others may be blessed as well. Give online at pointofview.net. Or you can call us and give toll-free 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me just mention as a program note that Monday is Labor Day, so we will be playing a tape, and you will have a chance to hear in the first hour from Jack Hibbs. He's been on the program with us before. Second hour, Sean McDowell. So whether it's politics or apologetics, I think you will appreciate both of those. Penna, I don't know if you've been following what's going out there in California, but they have this particular, was it AB 495, in which you could go in and say, well, I'm the caretaker for that child and take the child out, and the implication is this would be helpful for anybody that might be deported, but some people, including Jack Hibbs, have said this could be misused, and so we are certainly going to be following that story for some time.
It could. I think when I heard about that bill, I immediately thought of James Younger and Jeff Younger,
yes,
because Jeff Younger, he was one of the early parents fighting for his child not to be transitioned from a boy to a girl, and the mother wanted to do it, and she ended up taking that boy out to California. I thought, and in California, they believe in taking your children away if you won't transition them. So I thought of that agenda being a lot easier for them if it passes.
Let me just mention real quickly that one of the things that we are talking about is how the Democratic Party can go crazy, and we've seen some of that in the state of California. I posted this piece by Victor Davis Hanson. It goes on for 7 pages. I won't even try to cover all of it, but I think it's just an illustration that whether, as he talks about globalization, whether you talk about illegal immigration, whether you talk about higher education, whether you talk about even just the whole issue of defund the police, it does seem to me, Dr. Matthews, that Donald Trump has seen a lot of these 80-20 issues, sometimes 90-10 issues. He's in the 80 and the 90. And it's just amazing to me, the leadership in the Democratic Party, such that it is, and sometimes they're trying to find who the new leader is, always ends up taking some minority position and really hurting them if they are concerned about these midterm elections.
And interestingly, they are also saying that Gavin Newsom is increasingly adopting a Donald Trump style in much of the things that he's doing. But I think if the New Testament was being written today, the question would be, can any good thing come out of California? Because so much of this, and you wonder what people are thinking when they do this stuff. I mean, it wasn't that long ago they were looking at trying to pay reparations to everybody in California. They drive the EV mandate that's been out there as many states, I think something like 17 states adopted California standards as trying to move to electric vehicles, and now a lot of that is changing. It's just California's come up with a lot of bad legislation and ideas.
It also illustrates the issue. Penna Dexter and I can remember a time when there was a little bit more of a difference. I had a father that ran for the California Assembly, but now it really has become kind of a one-party state. And so as a result, any action that wants to be implemented by the governor or by the state senate or the assembly pretty much happens, and Democrats are already in the minority. And if Gavin Newsom has his way, he wants to gerrymander it even further.
And we were talking about the census earlier. A lot of those Californians are moving to Texas or Florida, other states. They're abandoning those states, and it's becoming a real problem for New York, Illinois, and some of the sort of the really solid blue states as so many people move out. And it's not all ideologically driven. So part of it is, but many cases they just don't want to pay the high taxes, especially in New York and some of those states where the rich have to pay significantly higher taxes. In California, they have to pay very high gas taxes. So it's people are fleeing them and they're moving to states. And there was some concern that are they going to bring their blue values here in Texas and end up voting for Democrats? But we haven't any evidence of that so far.
So I think one of the other reasons they're leaving is because the leftist policies in those states are resulting in high crime and homelessness and making living there just a lot less pleasant, even though, as in the case of California, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But if you've got homeless people hanging around your town and you've got high crime and you're afraid, then you might start packing your bags.
And the prices. The regulations that cause so many problems there, Pacific Palisades. I read an article, I guess, this past week or 10 days or so, that Pacific Palisades, which was burned down here not long ago, are not able to. They're not rebuilding yet because of so many regulations prohibiting them to try to rebuild their homes.
I did a piece a while back. You probably saw it, California Leaving, and what I did was really just talk about one individual, and that is the president of In-N-Out Burger. Now, think about this for just a minute. Most of their restaurants are in California, and yet, interesting enough, Lindsay Snyder, the CEO of In-N-Out Burger, moves her family to Tennessee. Now, think about that. When she was interviewed by Allie Beth Stuckey, used to be part of our Millennia Roundtable, she said, I really liked Northern California, and I'm really thankful that I grew up there. But she says there's a lot of great things about California, but raising a family is not easy there. Doing business is not easy there. Dr. Matthews talked about the whole issue of trying to do business, trying to build a restaurant, trying to refurbish a restaurant. But there was another issue, Penna, you talked about. She also left not only because it's just hard to do business because they're still going to have their businesses there, it's just hard to raise a family there because of all the things happening in California.
Well, yes, what's being taught in the public schools and, the fact that you go to the public schools and parents don't have rights. Their rights aren't protected in many cases. In some of the conservative parts of Orange County, they're really having to fight for that. So it is hard to raise a family there. I mostly didn't raise my children there, but I did start out there. I was homeschooling all of that time.
Remember that?
But, going to what the Democrats are doing, they do control California, and you don't have to have a Republican candidate there. You could have two Democrats. It's whoever wins the primaries.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason it's gotten even worse than it was before. But Victor Davis Hanson, in this piece we posted, says that the Democratic project is bleeding out because it either does not address what the middle class is worried about, or it offers no solution to popular anger over things like inflation or DEI or illegal immigration, and on and on and on. So the middle class is being and the working class used to be their primary constituents,
right?
And now it isn't.
They've lost it.
They've lost it, and so they've lost huge numbers. Now he does say that it's possible that the Democrats will still win at the midterms. But it won't be because of issues. It will be because of Trump hatred.
But again, that is interesting because it's talking about the lack of solutions. We talked about someone just the other day that actually for many years had worked with Rush Limbaugh, but he said that Democrats could learn the phrase, yes, and, or yes, but. Instead of saying, well, we think that having the National Guard is a bad idea, or we don't think there's really crime in the District of Columbia, or we don't think that we should have the National Guard in Chicago, the mayor, and he didn't do a very good job, Mayor Johnson, just simply said, well, we need more housing, or we need more money for housing, instead of saying, well, okay, putting some more police on the streets might help initially, but but again, he could have said yes, but it's almost impossible right now for a Democratic leader, whether it's the mayor in Baltimore, mayor in Chicago, whether it's some of the leaders in Congress, even individuals that are in the Senate or the House, to say, yes, but here's our alternative. And the alternative almost never gets mentioned. It's always, we just hate Trump, orange man bad. That's not going to work very well.
But the mayor of Washington, D.C., Merrill Bowser, she's actually admitted now that the policies have helped reduce crime in D.C.
You noticed I skipped over her because she's actually the other day. I kept waiting when she was speaking to wait for the rest of the story, but she actually said thank you for the fact that we actually went up until that time. It was 12 full days without a murder in the district.
There was a article in the Free Press by a lady who used to live in Washington, D.C., and she mentioned that she had been assaulted, and she went and took it to the police, and the police took down the notes, but then they didn't have any record of it. So her point was, when they're saying the crime is going down, in some cases it may be because the police are simply not recording this in a way that comes out. Because if you're a chief of police, you don't want to see crime statistics going up. You want them going down.
Yeah.
So one way you do it is you just fudge the numbers.
Well, they cook the books. I think we figured that out. And there were some documentations the other day in the Oval Office about here's a murder, but they counted it as an accident. And all sorts of other things. And carjackings are down and all sorts of other things. Who knew? You put some law enforcement people out on the streets and all of a sudden the crime goes down. As a matter of fact, we had John Lott on the other day, and he's pointed out the fact that now, if you look over now the last almost now 8 months, if this trend continues, we'll have the lowest murder rate in history. And part of that, he says, is due to the fact that once you start deporting people, other people that might have committed a crime don't go out on the streets. And number two, Kash Patel, let's give him some credit, took some FBI agents and put them to other parts of the country. And now, of course, putting out the National Guard, we may have the lowest murder rate in the history of this country.
The man who threw a sandwich at a police officer was let off, though, so we may have more sandwich attacks.
Yeah, we have more sandwich attacks. Going to take a break. We will get into the way you might listen to Penna Dexter's commentary on Dr. Dobson. We'll be right back.
The year was 1977. I was a baby Christian living in a suburb of Los Angeles. I volunteered to man the book table at an event at our church put on by a new organization, Focus on the Family. Before the program even started, attendees were stopping at my table, buying books with titles like Dare to Discipline, Hide or Seek, Preparing for Adolescence, What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. A kind man approached to thank me for helping. I didn't realize yet that he was the speaker. He told me to choose a couple of books for myself. I wasn't a parent then or even married, but that was the day Dr. James Dobson began to have an influence on my parenting. I listened to enough Focus on the Family radio that I felt I really knew Dr. Dobson when I finally got to interview him on Point of View. Over the years, he was gracious to appear on the show, mostly covering hot-button issues. Dr. Dobson's calling to equip parents informed his growing concern about societal challenges to the traditional family, including divorce, abortion, and the redefinition of marriage. He took some bold stances and encouraged millions of American parents to join him. In early 2010, out of the blue, I received an interesting request. Tyndale House Publishers wanted to know if I would interview Dr. Dobson for a promotional special on his latest book, Bringing Up Girls. I agreed, and in March, I flew to Colorado Springs. I encountered a weary Dr. Dobson. The U.S. Congress was on the verge of passing Obamacare. Dr. Dobson was in the thick of the battle to ensure abortion would not be funded through the legislation. He was gracious. We discussed the book, our daughters, we each had one, hormones, and how to raise girls in a hostile culture. Dr. Dobson has finished his course faithfully. He enters the rest and joy prepared for him. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we have in studio with us Dr. Merrill Matthews and Penna Dexter. And I thought I'd come to Penna. First of all, you can see her commentary on Dr. Dobson, which is so good. And a reminder that they were some of these great individuals that we've always enjoyed having on the program have passed on. But while we're talking about change, Penna Dexter, we're talking about another change. And that is you finally said it is time for you to retire. And I couldn't certainly remember the first time you came and worked with Marlon Maddox. And you have been so stalwart and such a great co-host for all these years here on Point of View.
Well, I've so enjoyed it, and I had to thank you for even being here because you brought me in as a guest. And we talked about Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. That first time I was on Point of View, and that was 29 years ago. And
wow.
So thanks for that. It's just been great. I've hardly been on lately the last couple of years. My life has just changed, and I have a lot of grandchildren. And I finally decided that that ought to be maybe just a change in my life. And you have so many great people, you and Buddy, but also Liberty and Chelsea and all the millennials that have come in and started doing the show. And so, it's wonderful to see God just taking generations and institutions like Point of View and carrying them on in capable hands.
We thought we might listen to some of the comments that people have made about you. This is a shortened version, but again, Megan is so good at pulling out the highlights, and we'll make it available for people to hear the entire set of comments. But let's hear what they had to say.
Penna, I grew up listening to you on Point of View, and so it was surreal for me the first few times I got to co-host Point of View radio talk show with you, and you have been amazing to work with, always so kind and encouraging and such an example. Thank you so much for your leadership as somebody who advocates for Christian values in the culture and your leadership as a woman in radio. I so appreciate your legacy and your example.
Penna, I love you. You are the perfect big sister, and I have enjoyed working for you, posting your articles when you host, finding the perfect image for your Saturday Viewpoints commentaries, and getting and giving great hugs. You're a perfect example of a Proverbs 31 woman, and to me, you are a treasure. I am really going to miss you, but I'm very happy for you to spend more time with your family.
Hey, Penna, Jana here. I was finally able to meet you in person 9 months after I joined the Point of View team. And during that time, I had heard you speak with such power, passion, and authority. So imagine my surprise when your larger-than-life voice came from such a tiny, petite woman. Good things often do come in small packages. Your love for Christ is evident, and you serve him in such a mighty way. Thank you for the many years of commitment to getting truth and biblical views out across our nation. The impact you have made in the lives of Point of View listeners is immense. You will truly be missed.
Penna, you have been an invaluable part of this team for so many years. I'm not quite sure how we're going to get along without you. You have given so much to the ministry, and we are blessed to have had you join us as part of the team. I know your family has been pushing you to do this for a while, and I'm sure they're happy that you're finally taking a step back from the broadcast. But for those of us on the team, we are saddened, and we are deeply going to miss you, and I know the audience will as well.
Hey, Penna, what a great time it has been working with you over these last 8 years, I guess it's been. You bring such a wealth of knowledge to the interviews. And it's so much fun to see you interact with the guests in the studio. And as a producer, I can always count on you knowing your topic and your guest and being so easy to work with. You have been such a vital voice for Point of View, and we are where we are today in large part because of you. So maybe you'll come back from time to time as a guest. Pretty please? I will miss talking Anglicanism with you and having those impromptu conversations about any number of things before and after the show. And I will miss complimenting your awesome wardrobe. I mean, what am I going to say to Kerby? Nice blue shirt. All right. Grace and peace to you, my friend.
Okay, and I guess that is enough. I had never heard it, so I didn't know it.
You made me laugh instead.
First of all, Merrill Matthews, you and I have been around for a long time, but we can remember when we said to Marlon Maddox, you'd be really smart if you would bring Penna on, and they said, well, let her do women's issues. And after about a week, we said, Everything's a woman's issue, right?
Right, and I think you were the first female voice to come on a steady basis for a long time. So it was a change there with Marlon's deep melodic voice, and all of a sudden you've got Penna there. And I remember going back there because you came in, I think 96, and
Yes.
I was around since 91. So it was a major change, and what a great change it was.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was such a privilege to come and be able to sit around the table. We had more of a round table then with both of you
Yes.
on Fridays. I mean, it has been such an awesome privilege. You guys are both so brilliant and well-read and knowledgeable that you've made me better as a person, and certainly I would have never been a broadcaster at all if it hadn't been for y'all. And so thanks. And thank you for that beautiful tribute and allowing people who I've loved and appreciated for so many years. And that includes you too, Megan, who put that together. Her voice wasn't on there, but her talent was in it. So thank you, and I love Point of View, and I'll be listening to you all the time.
Yes.
You better broadcast and think of me when you're saying some of the
We
things you're
certainly
saying.
will. And again, I'd just like to say to both of you, you bring so much to the table. I mean, there is, matter of fact, I have said to more than a few people, I'm sure I've said it to Chelsea, I'm sure I've said it to Liberty, I've said it to others, if you want to know how to be effective, follow what Penna does. I mean, Dr. Matthews, you can see all the pieces of paper here and all the things that she has written on, and she's written all that and thought it through and read all of that, and that is, I think, very impressive, because a lot of people, as you know, you've been on a few talk shows, Dr. Matthews, where the person says, now tell me about what's in your book, and we always try to bring an informed perspective to all of our issues.
And I have to say, Penna's pieces are so good. I mean,
Yes, they are.
I'm
We'll
amazed that
hear
you
those.
keep, because
Yeah.
if you do this on a regular basis, you're constantly looking for topics, and then sometimes you bleed over and do something but Penna's are always fresh, original, and things I wouldn't have even thought of, and she's pulled this out and provides great information that I wasn't aware of.
Yes. And
well,
again,
back at you,
yes.
Buddy Matthews.
Well,
You have
we've
such
got,
fresh and original
We
articles.
got 3 articles by Merrill Matthews, and of course the commentary today on Dr. Dobson. And just as we wind down, this is a kind of transition, but it's also been a transition where we see some of these great individuals that came before us, and we're passing the baton on, and you're willing to do that as well. So, Penna, we appreciate you, and you bring so much to the table, and it means a lot that you would be able to, at least on this last Friday in August, be able to say goodbye.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything.
Well, I'm not going to put her on the spot
God
anymore,
bless you all.
but we certainly next week will be doing a Labor Day tape, and you'll hear Jack Hibbs, and you'll hear certainly Sean McDowell. In 2 weeks, we will be in Georgia, so I know we'll be actually doing a live broadcast from Augusta, Georgia, but also I know that Dr. Merrill Matthews, you're going to be speaking, and you'll also be doing the Friday edition, so there are opportunities there. Liberty will be doing one of those. We'll also have one of our next generation roundtable. So I think we're still in good hands with all the people here. But we will miss Penna, and certainly have benefited so much by all that she brought to the table. That's all we have. Certainly, Megan, thank you for doing all that you've done today, engineering the program, pulling that together. Steve, thank you for your kind comments, for producing the program. Enjoy the Labor Day weekend. See you back here on Tuesday live, right here on Point of View.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.